Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and welcome back to another episode of Mario's Minute. For those who do not know, this is a podcast I do here in two different forms. First of all, it is available in a video visual form here on the Mr. Mario 2011 YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey channels if you want a visual component to it. There's nothing too much going on here, though. It's really just me talking with a cool-looking visualizer over my channel art. At least I think it's a cool-looking visualizer, but either way, that's usually where the communication, comments, and conversations and stuff end up happening once the episode has been released. However, I did say that this is a podcast, and much like a podcast, it should be available in a audio-only form. So if you want to, you can look up Mario's Minute on your favorite podcasting app, host, provider, or platform, and you should hopefully be able to find it. I know it's not available on all of the platforms, but it's available on most of them. Either way, Mario's Minute is where I come on. I talk to you all about some things that I might find interesting, entertaining. Really, there's not all too much to it. I kind of just come on here with a list of topics, and I kind of just talk about whatever the hell I want to. Sometimes I have a guest on it, sometimes I don't, and I do want to apologize. It is on me. I can make excuses and all that, and I will talk about it a little bit, but it is on me. I did not get a guest for this episode of Mario's Minute. I will try to get a guest next time, but I'll be honest, I didn't even reach out to anyone just because of how my schedule has been and everything. It's been good stuff for the most part, but just because of that, because I've kind of been scrambling to do a few things both online and offline, guests just didn't line up, so my apologies about that. But either way, let's go ahead and get into this episode here for June of 2024. Well, I did want to say here, first of all, hopefully I should sound maybe a little bit better for a couple of different reasons here. One of them being that if you listen to the last episode of Mario's Minute, I ended up using a gamer headset. It was like some HyperX Cloud type headset or something, which isn't bad. But then when I was actually, for the applications I was using it for, it was fine. But at the time I was traveling, and that was the only good microphone I had, so I ended up using that, and the audio came out, and when I didn't touch up on it at all, it just sounded like gamer headset audio. There was a part of me that almost did not edit it, not because of laziness, but just because there's a side of me that would have thought it was just hilarious to kind of have just gamer headset audio for that one entire episode. But I was like, no, I can't do that to people. No, can't do that. If there was an expectation, if that was my standard quality that you all were used to, sure. But when there was a drop, I'm just like, I'm going to try to change it up a little bit. And I'm I used to say I'm an audiophile. I'm not really that much of an audiophile by any means. I'm not crazy with the mixing and mastering and all that stuff, but I want something to at least sound good. And I feel like I did my best with what I was working with that episode. Thankfully, there was no complaints about the audio on there, so I think as long as I didn't get any complaints, job well done on that. But like I said, again, I was not able to get that done properly, just because, well, I was able to get out an episode in the end, thankfully, but I ended up traveling, and that was a part of why I was so busy, because in short, I can't go into the details all too much. There's nothing bad, thankfully. The bad thing I do want to talk about here, though, was that I had to travel, and then I came back, ended up traveling again, and that was right around the time when I ended up getting sick. And it's I try not to do it there, but that was I don't get sick all too often, but it just didn't work out very well timing wise. It did, but it didn't. It was kind of just hey, this is the time I cannot get sick. I do not want to get sick. I don't have the time, and I'm sick. Okay. Thankfully, it was not COVID. I did test for it. I have had COVID once before, and I had it in 2022. So I know how it feels, at least for me, and this was definitely not that. However, it ended up being bronchitis. I knew it was bad when, at first, I was coughing, and I was like, okay, this should be fine. And then I ended up taking some medicine for it, and I was starting to at least feel a little bit better. But then there was one day, usually for me, it's when I'm coughing and my lungs feel like a dog's squeaky toy on its final squeaks, I'm like, okay, there's something wrong here. If I was coughing, that's fine, but this part is not different. And I'll tell you all this. I've had bronchitis multiple times in my life, I hate that. I hate that infection. I hate it so much, man. I hate it. Because there's been, I think like the first time I really remember it, it was like well over like 10 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. But it had hit me in college where I thought I just had like a cold or a flu or something, and then I kind of got it over, like I got it over with. And what ended up happening was I just had this cough that wouldn't go away for like 3 weeks. And I remember when I went to the doctor, that's when, he checked me. He said, "Oh, yeah, you have bronchitis." And I was kind of just like used to it. So he ended up giving me some good medication. And then I wasn't feeling the best on all of it, but I was recovering at least. And it took me several months to recover from that because even like 2, 3 months out, I was still like having like little coughs here and there. So it takes a while. Thankfully, this one, I caught it well enough. And I think modern medicine has just also advanced well enough to the point where this has been the best round of bronchitis I've had, which it sounds odd to say, but it was just I was able to get everything done properly on time. My partner was here to help me out as well too. I was resting a lot as well. There was one day, it was like a Sunday when I got all this done. I went to sleep at 4 p.m. Like that was it. I was just like, I don't really have all too much else to do, and I am exhausted. And when you're sick, you gotta sleep, and a bed sounds really nice right now. So I went to bed at 4 p.m. and I woke up every few hours, to do certain things like take out the dogs, eat, do whatever I needed to, do the needful stuff. But yeah, that's how bad it was there. Thankfully, though, like I said, modern medicine was helpful. Ended up getting a few medications, and I started feeling pretty good within a few days. And even so, I didn't have, that was all this month, and I didn't have the cough, like the lingering cough or anything. So this has definitely been the best recovery period that I've had, thankfully. But yeah, no. So that's what ended up happening there. Another thing that ended up happening that I wanted to talk a little bit about was Midwest Fest. Now, for anybody who does not know, this is I guess you could say kind of a gaming type festival and all that, or gaming type convention that takes place in Kansas City. Now, I had been invited before and timing just didn't line up, but this time around, shout out to Virusy from All-in-One Gaming, or the All-in-One Gaming Expo, and they were kind of under the umbrella of Midwest Fest here. It was kind of just a lot of things combined into one, which is really cool because there was a really big esports component. They had several sponsors, but I know like All-in-One Gaming was there. There was a few other things going on as well too. Just like I said, I'm doing a poor job explaining it, but there was a bunch of arcade games. There was a bunch of panels that were going on. I didn't go to any of the panels there. And then Artist Alley and several other people who were just, like buying, selling games, things like that. So it was really cool to see overall. And it was in a pretty big arena, but it was also like chill and low key enough where you didn't have the issue where if you're someone who you just don't want to be in big crowds of people, you don't want people to be like shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't something like the last convention I went to was Anime Expo, for example, where it was absolutely packed, like to capacity, to a dangerous level. No, this one was not that, thankfully. It was much more chill. But either way, they'd reached out to me at one point, and they were wanting to kind of get me on a panel or something. I just said like, hey, look, I appreciate it, but I'd kind of just like, I'd be cool just like attending. Like if that's possible, if not, all good. And they said, yeah, sure. We'll set you up as a creator. So essentially it was kind of just like, I was kind of in with, I guess, press and creators and stuff, you could say, where it allowed us to have, access to like the little lounge they had. So there was like water, there was soda there. They ended up having like pizza near the end of the day. Like the one day I was there for most of it. But then I also got early access into the venue as well too. And then aside from that, I kind of just got to go around and like experience the convention and talk to people and all that, which was nice. End up finding a few good game deals as well too. End up seeing some pretty awesome stuff. I only ended up going 2 days, although technically one, because it was Friday evening and then it was Saturday, Sunday. And just with the way everything worked, Saturday was the only one day I could really go and dedicate to it, unfortunately. But on Friday, my partner and I ended up going. They ended up opening up the place early. So just, so you can get situated, get prepared, get set up, talk to people, mingle, network, and then just, do whatever you wanted to. And it was really cool because there was a gaming museum there, which a big shout out to them. I believe it's like the Retro Gaming Hunter. I spoke with Joe from over there and ended up seeing some really awesome stuff. And it was funny because it's like when we were talking about things, he was teaching me a lot, but then he was kind of like lighting up as well too, that I knew some of the stuff that was going on. I'm not into sports games at all. But I think it was which one was it here? I need to double check the name because like I said, I'm not into sports games. Here we go. So I got most excited because the thing that they were really showing the most was at least at the at this area, like the gaming museum area, was a NBA Elite 11. And for anyone who does not know, in short, this was kind of supposed to be the grand return of like the NBA Elite series. And there was a demo that ended up coming out. And the demo was panned so hard because the game was so glitchy, it was so buggy, it was not done well, that EA ended up canceling this game. But they canceled it after it had gone gold, after it was pressed, but before it was released. So because of that, there was several copies of the game that went out to the public, but really copies of the game were supposed to hit game shops, and then places like Target, Walmart, GameStop, EB Games, they were supposed to ship their shipments back. Obviously, that didn't fully happen because there are complete copies of the game that came out, and it's not a game that released, funny enough, but it is a game that had an official pressing, and you can get a full complete kit and everything for it. Like, it's a complete in box. The only oddity is that on PS3, it's more notable, just because it's accessible there. While it's on Xbox 360, I don't believe for a while, it was supposed to come out on there as well too, but for a while, I don't believe people didn't even believe that there was a 360 copy that had gotten pressed until like several years ago. There was one copy, like the first copy that was ever known of this. It was disc only. It wasn't even complete, but it was a pressed disc only version of the game for 360. And it ended up being, sold to a collector or something, I'm sure. So either way, it was exciting to talk about that there. They ended up showing a couple of like really cool, like customized consoles that they had been given to a couple members of the NBA, like some of the team members who ended up helping with the game, essentially. I don't remember the names of them. It wasn't anyone big, but I don't remember the names, and they were able to find out who it was as well too. But it was overall just like, cool seeing that lineage and that history there. I ended up, like I said, I was mostly kind of like going around the place and stuff, just like checking a few things out. Really enjoyed. I found out with conventions, I love like the artist alley type setup. So really seeing like what art is being sold, what games are being premiered there, game sales as well too, since it was a big gaming convention. So with that, I ended up seeing a couple friends there. One of them, it was a surprise to see, and then the other one, shout out to one of my Discord staff team members, Taz. He had said he was going, and I was like, hey, when I'm there, I'll let you know. So he ended up finding me when I was in conversation, and then we were able to talk about some stuff, catch up, got a picture, and we were all good after that. But it was a cool thing to experience overall, because I'm talking about it here just because I've never done any convention things, any appearances, any setups like that as Mr. Mario. I have been to conventions as a guest. Like, I buy my own ticket. I'm just myself there. I go to attend. That's it. And I just blend into the crowd. And I've done that with a few conventions. And I don't want to say which ones, but there was at least like one or two conventions that I was more gung-ho about going to, like as in kind of like an invite in a way, like they would have had me do something, invite me out there. But that was a few years ago. And then, of course, since it's a few years ago, COVID ended up messing everything up. So there's been that, but excuse me. The funny thing is, I think it kind of used to be a thing for me where I was a little more gung-ho, like, hey, let's do this. And now I'm kind of at the point I'm just like, I'm okay just like going. Like, if you could just like have me, like, don't put a spotlight on me. I kind of just want to be one of the people. Will be okay. But honestly, I'm not saying never, but that I think that could change. I think it's realistic that could change. And if I'm ever out for a panel or something, or I'm helping out someone with a panel, that'd be cool. But this was one of those things where it was like, I want to get like my pinky toe wet in something like this, like going to something as Mr. Mario. And it was low key enough that I was happy to do it there. There wasn't like a limelight on me. There wasn't a spotlight, and that's one thing as well too. I think it's kind of contradictory, just because I have a bigger YouTube channel on here. But all in all, like honestly, I tell people I'm a social introvert. I love to talk to people. I'm a social person, but dude, the way I recharge my batteries is at home, not interacting with anyone. If it's something like, hey, we can go out to this one really packed bar district and just like yell at each other like in a packed crowd and just have a bunch of fun and go outside till like 3 a.m. Or it's like, hey, you kind of just want to do like some low key at home. Occasionally I'll do the thing where I'll like go out like that, but even, as someone who doesn't drink, doesn't really appeal to me all too much. So what I'm saying is like, it's funny, I guess the little bit of kind of like limelight that I do want, I get satisfied on the channel, and then anything else I'm kind of like, no, I'm good. I kind of just want to be low key about this here. I kind of just want to do my own thing. I just want to blend in, essentially. I'm just one of the people. But either way, I do want to thank all of them there, Midwest Fest, and then All in One Gaming as well too, for inviting me, bringing me out there, letting me attend and all that, and just have a fun time. And like I said, it's kind of one of those things where I got my pinky toe a little bit wet in the world of doing that there, doing the type of convention thing. And do I want to do more of it? Yeah, actually, I do. I think it'd be cool. So another thing that was pretty cool was, I guess this month, Nintendo ended up doing a Nintendo Direct for June 2024. Now, I didn't follow this all too much as it was, starting to get announced, starting to get hyped and such. And it's funny because even the way I consume a lot of these things now is I'll either kind of just see some stuff like get hyped up on Twitter, or I usually go to like a publication such as IGN, for example, where they're just like breaking down all the releases, and I'll kind of just read through that and cherry pick and see like, hey, that looks interesting, that looks cool. I'm not interested in this stuff. I don't really like to just watch the entire conference anymore. I would say I don't think it's an ADHD or like an attention span thing for me. I think it's just a thing of there's been, so many years of E3, rest in peace, but so many years of E3 that I had, done coverage of, not in any official capacity, just like unofficial stuff like here on the channel for fun. But I did coverage, I gave my opinions, I was following the press conferences and all that. And even though I would have fun doing that, it's also kind of a thing of when I step back, I was like, wow, there was like a lot of time and there was a lot of like stuff I was watching there that I didn't really care for. So I kind of don't mind just having someone else do the recap and then I'll read up on it. Or if there's a specific funny thing that happens, like when Keanu Reeves at the I guess premiere of Cyberpunk 2077 had said, you're breathtaking, like stuff like that, like him coming out, doing that, having a good time. Sure, I'll catch up with clips on that. Either way, there were a lot of games that people were excited for, and the ones that I was excited for, I thought it was funny. They weren't the ones that people would expect, I suppose. I do know it looks like with Legend of Zelda, there is going to be a new one that's coming out that's supposed to have Zelda herself be the main character, and they're kind of doing the same like Link's Awakening remake type look. So that looks like it'll be charming. Tons of people were just completely obsessed with Metroid Prime 4 getting more footage, getting more coverage, getting a release window at least, and I think that's really cool. My friends specifically, one of my group chats was lighting up a whole bunch. The thing that they were most excited about was Marvel vs. Capcom, which from what I understand, they're doing a Marvel vs. Capcom collection, which is pretty much going to be all of them prior to 3. So there's going to be 7 games in total, but the ones that people care about the most are going to be Marvel vs. Capcom and, of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think it's really cool to see this here. That was something that I don't think anybody was expecting a release of. I just hope it's really going to be a good release. They're not going to drop the ball on it. I do predict that when it comes to the different platforms and such, the Switch one will probably suffer the most, not in terms of like graphical horsepower or anything, but in terms of the online infrastructure. I think the people that do care enough are going to take their systems, dock them, and hardwire them in through Ethernet, and then play that way, which is how you should play on there. But I will say, when it comes to online play over the Nintendo Network, because I play online at this point pretty much almost every week with some friends, uh, even though like we all have pretty good connections, and I actually made sure when I was like getting the friend group together, I said, hey guys, everyone hardwire your Switch. It's not going to be great if you go wireless. If one person goes wireless, it's going to bring the whole group down. So we're all hardwired, but there's even times where it's like, most of the time it's pretty good, but there's times where there's going to be issues. But my fear is when it comes to fighting games, pretty good over all through the Nintendo Network, I don't think is going to be enough when you're playing competitively online, if you choose to play competitively online. So I think a lot of people kind of play it for fun locally or offline on the Switch, or especially if it's going to be competitive, it's going to be local. But when it comes to the online play, that's where the Switch version is really not going to do as well compared to the other platforms that's going to be running on. So there was that, at least. Marvel vs. Capcom, very awesome to see. I will say this here for anyone listening, if you're thinking about getting it. I did see this on Twitter, and I don't know who it was because, of course, it refreshed, so I have no idea who it is. But they ended up saying, if you're thinking of picking up that game, you're probably going to want to go physical on there. And this is me adding to it now. I can agree with that, and that's a good point. Just because when it comes to Marvel versus Capcom, there's so much licensing there. Obviously, there's so much licensing, but that amount of licensing has led to the game being delisted multiple times. So what I'm saying here is, don't be surprised if you end up picking up this collection and within 2 years of it being released, it ends up getting delisted for some BS reason. So that's what I would recommend to people if you're wanting to not only support that kind of release, but really make sure you keep it. Buy it physical. Even if you're one of those people who's just like, oh, I buy all my games digital, or I have the Switch and I only have one game physical and all my other 50 games are digital and I don't even use the cartridges. Dude, just get it physical. That's what I'm gonna say. The ones that I guess the game I was most excited for, though, funny enough, I was happy for Marvel vs. Capcom being announced. However, for me, I think the most exciting thing, which I'm just waiting to get it pre-ordered, and I know some people will be against pre-ordering, but it's like, with the weird supply chain stuff happening with physical games, in 2024, we're kind of back at a point where if you want a game physically, even on launch day, you might have to pre-order it, because there's just a chance, your store might not get enough copies, or they're not going to get any copies at all. What I'm saying here, though, is Super Mario Party Jamboree. That ended up getting announced, and I'll be honest, even at this point, I haven't even looked at anything about it. I just saw the title, and I got really excited, and I saw the release date. It's going to be, I think, in October. And I told my friends that I play with, I said, guys, we got to get this game. We got to get this. Just because many times, if our group is big enough, we end up playing Mario Party together online. And we have had so many great moments with it. We primarily play on Switch. We've played Mario Party 1 and 2. We've played some of Super Mario Party, and then we mostly play Superstars. So if I can get another Mario Party that's going to create more of those wonderful, hilarious moments that have had some of us bent over, just dying laughing and in pain from laughing so much, that's what I'm most excited about. It's not the game itself, it's going to be the experiences and the memories that come out of it. So that's why that was the game I was most excited for. And I was like, all these other ones, that's cool, that's exciting, sure, but this was a day zero purchase for me. The other thing I ended up finding interesting was the emulators for Nintendo Switch Online ended up getting updated. Not just the emulators, they got more ROMs and such on there, but there was a new one for the N64, because there's two games that came to it, one being Perfect Dark and the other one being Turok Dinosaur Hunter. And this was also interesting because Turok is both those games are M-rated games. And I was just sitting here thinking, okay, it will integrate into the Nintendo Switch Online app, the N64 like expansion pack app. The issue that came up with this, though, is I believe they did this because I believe the games that are in those are pretty much in a range from like E to T, at least over, North American territories. But they released a whole separate app on the Nintendo 64. And it's not just because it's like, oh, this is a new improved emulator. It's like, no. It's I hate it, but I find it hilarious at the same time. On the Switch, they pretty much pulled a Microsoft, because on Microsoft, for example, you could get Teams, like Microsoft Teams, but you can't even use that anymore because if you open up Microsoft Teams, it makes you download and install the new Microsoft Teams, which is just called New Teams. Or, for example, Outlook. There's two versions of Outlook now. The thick client is what I'm talking about. There's Outlook or there's Outlook New. Yeah, Microsoft kind of did what Nintendo did with the 3DS, except they ended up doing it with applications and also on like an enterprise level. And also it's with multiple applications. And then Nintendo kind of did a little bit the same thing. So now you have two Nintendo 64 apps. You either have Nintendo 64 or you have Nintendo 64 Mature 17 plus. Aside from that, I mean, I downloaded it, I fired it up, I booted into Turok, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. It displays kind of funny though, because you can get the full Turok game on the Switch, like Turok Dinosaur Hunter, the one about like 10 years ago that was remastered. It is ported on Switch. It is so good. It's so good on Switch. And I was like, it's cute that the ROM is on there, but if you could choose between the ROM and playing the remaster, I would really, 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 really recommend playing the remaster over that. Perfect Dark, I didn't touch. One, because I never got into Perfect Dark, and two, I kind of figured if it was going to be anything like the GoldenEye ROM on Nintendo Switch Online, that it would probably be plagued with a lot of issues. And unfortunately, I did end up seeing some entertaining threads from Grassloo00, who is a known not so much Perfect Dark, but I believe like GoldenEye streamer, YouTuber, and they do a lot of world records and speedruns on it, is what I'm trying to say, and do just a lot of challenges on there. So they're one of those people. They might know GoldenEye better than so many other people in the world. But they're familiar with Perfect Dark as well, and they ended up playing through Perfect Dark, like the NSO version, and talked about all of its issues there. So I would rather have him, talk and discuss that as opposed to me butchering it there. But yeah, no, those are the things that at least kind of like poked out to me. And like I said, I just find it a little funny because like Marvel vs. Capcom, cool. Mario Party, I was super excited for. The N64 emulator, I thought it was funny. They made a whole other app for that. But then when it came to things like Metroid Prime 4, I was like, oh, I'm happy for y'all. That's cool. That's cool. Good for y'all. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this here, because I'll be honest, I don't do DIY all too much. Thankfully, the need doesn't really come up, but it's gotten to the point that around the house here, I've started doing a little more DIY, simply out of cost, because there's times I can look up something and it's like, either I can spend $30 and an hour of my time doing this, or I know if I call someone out to do this here, they will replace the part and install it, and it's going to cost like $500. So my example of that was with last year, this ended up happening. The capacitor on my AC unit ended up going out, and it just meant that the AC unit, it was blowing, but it wasn't actually generating any cold air. It was just pushing air, and that was it. I wasn't frozen over or anything, thank goodness. But what ended up happening was I've had the capacitor replaced on it before, and it is expensive to replace them if you pay someone to do it. However, if you look into it, AC units, as long as you can cut power to them, they're kind of intimidating just because they're so big and they're going to be outside, and they could electrocute you. But if you cut power, you should theoretically be okay. But really, as long as you can get it open to access the capacitor, there's only like 3 or 4 things that really go wrong with an AC unit. And like 75% of those you can do on your own, thanks to YouTube University. So what I'm saying is, when that happened, I ended up getting a capacitor for like, I had to get it in town, so I ended up paying more. It was maybe like $35-40, but I was able to replace it myself. It was simple enough, and it was one of those things where it's like, some people say, "Oh no, you have to know what you're doing in order to do that. If you know what you're doing, it's easy." I tell you this. I'm not great at DIY. I had no idea what I was doing. I just used YouTube University and a toolkit I had, and bled a little bit, cussed a whole lot as I banged up my head a few times. I was not in like the optimal spot for that. But either way, I was able to get that replaced. And then here's a tip for any of you all who have to work on like AC units or anything. If you ever have to replace a capacitor, which you do have to at one point, I'd recommend when you have to buy them, buy 2 of them, and just always keep one on hand. So that's what I ended up doing. I had a brand new one, and I bought another brand new one, and I just have it in one of my rooms in the basement. So that way, in case this ever happens again, which it will, just because it's one of those parts that does go bad and you have to replace it. Whenever it does go bad, I will be able to just run into that room and grab it, as opposed to looking around town or waiting on Amazon. So I've been doing a little more DIY with certain things. Did that. I ended up having to replace a garbage disposal as well. A few months ago, I ended up another capacitor actually in my garage door opener. The capacitor ended up blowing, and like smoke came out as well too. Thankfully, the circuit board and everything was fine, but it was just a capacitor in there, so I had to replace that. And yeah, that's what I've been saying. I've just been doing more DIY, but more one of the bigger ones here that ended up happening was my dryer. I've never run into this, thankfully, and I've had this dryer for years, and it was used as well too when I had gotten it. So that's all to say, it's been holding up incredibly well. I'm actually surprised that it took so long for something like this to happen. But at one point I was doing laundry, and when I ended up getting it, I said, the clothes are hot, but they're still like pretty damp. So I threw it in again for another load, and the dryer was making a little bit of a weird noise. Then when I checked, I saw that it was not circulating the laundry. It just wasn't moving, but the heating element, everything else still worked fine. So that's when I found out, thanks to really like one Google search and 1 or 2 videos on YouTube. I could have just done it with one, but I wanted to watch 2 of them. I ended up finding out that the belt ended up breaking, which that can happen. It's one of those parts that, again, you have to maintain, you have to replace. So what happened was I looked up my parts, I looked online, and it's one of those things I'm like, I kind of need the dryer. And again, I don't want to pay someone else for the labor, because I know this can easily be a few $100s. But I ended up finding out a belt was like $8 or $9 for this shipped. Or if you wanted to get a kit, which ended up having like a belt, a pulley, and a few like rotator wheels and some other clips, just the moving parts, like the small like moving parts in a dryer that you should replace when you do something like this, a whole kit was $25. So I said, let me go ahead and get this. Let me do this all. I was able to get it overnight shipped. And even when I did, when I was figuring this all out, I already had the dryer taken apart. 1, because I wanted to make sure I could do all this. And 2, I was like, if it's taken apart, I have more motivation to get this back done, like to get this all put back and working together quickly, as opposed to just like putting off and saying, I'll just, wait a week or 2. So what ended up happening was I got this, I was able to take it apart by myself. And then when I was putting everything back together, there was pretty much 4 pieces that I had to replace. It was like I said, like kind of 2 rotator wheels, 1 kind of pulley leverage type system. But then there was the actual belt itself. Really, I've been finding out and learning from more and more appliances that a lot of appliances, as long as I haven't worked with any of the smart ones, I kind of keep everything dumb on purpose. But these appliances, such as, like I said here, the dryer, it's really not that difficult to work on, thankfully. There's only a few things that can really go wrong with the dryer, and you can solve most of them yourself. And it's not so much that it's difficult, it's just everything is big because it's a dryer. So that's maybe like the biggest hurdle I had. It wasn't really the difficulty, it was more the size right there. But I ended up, got the kit, put most of it back in. And at that point, my partner actually came through and she was like, "Hey, do you need any help?" I was like, "Actually, it would be better to have another person help out with this." So she came in, she was able to help, kind of get things moved and situated and all that. We put everything back together. Thankfully, it all worked beautifully. And one nice thing as well, too, funny enough, I was talking about, not putting things off. I guess it's still good though. When something breaks, I want to fix it. I don't just want to have it sit there broken. I'll tell you this, it ended up breaking on a Thursday. I fixed it on Friday. It's now Monday while I'm recording this. I haven't used the dryer since. I did test it. I tested it. I made sure it worked, but I was like, I'm not going to run anything right now. I've gotten enough dryer love for a bit. Maybe it's that, but that's all to say. The reason why I'm telling this story is because, YouTube University. A big shout out and thank you to YouTube University. And it has been fantastic for people like me who have a little bit of, I guess, some timid curiosity with DIY, where it's like, I want to do, but there's a lot of times it kind of intimidates me. YouTube University makes that a lot easier. And I'll tell you this, if you start following through with that stuff too, like the things you learn, the things you look up, you end up saving a lot of money as well too. So what I'm really recommending to people is, I've talked a little bit about it before, but when it comes to home repair, car repair, any of these things, give it a good look on YouTube first. Just give it a good look and just kind of assess and be like, this is something I could do, or this is something I could try. Or if you look at it and you say, this is absolutely not something that I could do and I don't feel comfortable doing this, at that point, most certainly call a professional. I'm not trying to stop anyone with that. I'm just saying that you and many others are probably more capable than you can put on this. So, usually I end up near the end of these episodes, I end up sharing stories about when I used to work at a game shop. And for anybody who does not know, scary thing about 15 years ago, I ended up working at a game shop. It was a local mom pop store. I worked there for about 2.5 years. One of those things where it was my first job. I loved and hated the job all at once. I ended up loving, my coworkers. The discounts were nice. I still enjoyed many elements of the job, and I like working as well too, just like naturally I do. Things I didn't like is that, at the end of the day, even if you're working in a game shop, it's still a retail job. And essentially, from what I've gathered, the people who love their retail jobs just haven't worked retail enough. That's what it is. And I'm not saying that in an insulting way either. It's kind of like with IT. Like, if you're one of those people, you're in IT and you're like, oh, I don't think printers are bad. You just haven't worked with printers long enough. You keep working with printers long enough and you're going to hate them. But either way, I ended up working there for about 2.5 years, and I ended up leaving just because I had to go to college and such, and it was in another town. However, I still have love for this store, and it's been closed for a while now. So also, the funny thing is, I don't mind sharing a few of the other stories in regards to that. There's some stuff I won't share, of course, but usually I end up changing the names of everyone involved. So I guess there's only one story I'm going to tell here, but it's about a guy where this when I was working there, but it ended up being, it was someone who was applying for a job. Now, this is probably 2010 at the time, so you could bring in a resume and we would keep it on file. But this was back when it was just starting to get phased out, like just starting to. But this is back when there was the transition to, you don't really, you still have to come in to most places, and either you submit your resume or you can pick up a job application, you fill it out, you bring it back. So it was during that, actual physical job application era. Now you just do everything online. So I'm sure what I'm describing right now is completely foreign to many people who are listening. But either way, there was a few people who turned in their resumes, but most people ended up taking, they end up bringing, their job applications back. And there was one day we were asking about this because we needed some more help, and we had job applications and pretty much all of them were filled out. And my manager said, oh yeah, I guess we're going to, hopefully we hire someone. And he said, wait a minute, I can show you all the job applications. I think at this point, like, it's been so many years. Should my manager have done that? Probably not. But does it make for an entertaining story? Sure. Again, this is like 2010. It was a different time. It was a different era. And it's been a while now at this point. It's been like 14 years. But either way, he started like kind of going through the job applications. He's like, oh, I remember this person. Oh God, I remember this person. One of them, I think, was filled out in pencil. And that was actually something, I think we got onto that because my boss was actually ranting about it. He was like, you know, it's crazy. I have these job applications and I fill them out to people, and one of them came back in pencil. And it's like, why is this thing in pencil? You didn't even do it here. You took it home and you brought it back, and you're telling me you couldn't fill this thing out in pen even when you take it home overnight? Which, yeah, kind of outdated advice now at this point. But if you ever fill out a job application, don't do it in pencil. Okay. But I believe the person who filled their job application out in pencil, was the friend of this person that I wanted to talk about, which I didn't get to see this up close and personal, but my manager ended up painting a nice tale about it. Now, one thing you should know is that my manager is pretty heavily tatted up. He didn't have the face tattoos, he didn't have the neck tattoos, but he had one full sleeve. He had some tattoos on his other arm. He had some tattoos on his legs as well too. So he had a lot of tattoos on him, is what I'm saying. And it attracted attention for better or for worse. But what happened was there was one guy who ended up coming in, and I guess the story was he ended up filling out this job application. Like he comes in, my manager's the only one there, and he's just talking to him and just like lingering and hanging out and kind of just trying to, make friends with him. And my manager was just being professionally polite, but inside he was like, I don't want to talk to this guy. I don't want to deal with him. No. So then the guy gets to asking, hey, how do you get a job here? How do you do this? And my manager, for fun, because, he asked if there was a job application, and my manager's like, there's no way this guy's going to get hired. But like, sure, just go ahead and fill out a job application. And I don't necessarily remember the contents of it, but I more just remember this story. My manager told me not only the guy didn't leave with it, he ended up just filling it out right there. Like he just kind of like leaned up on the counter and asked for a pen and ended up filling everything out. The handwriting wasn't great from what I remember, but the main thing about it, and the reason why I brought up the tattoos, is that this is also just a thing where I don't know what was going through this person's head. For the person who's essentially going to have a very big role in like making or breaking your job application, I just don't understand this here. But essentially the guy had seen my manager's tattoos, and he asked, hey, like, you got tattoos, like, where do you get this work done? And my manager told him, he said, oh, I got this one done here, this one done here, this one done here. The guy then proceeded to insult his tattoos and just said something like, oh man, that doesn't look great. I do all my own work. Look at this. Then he took a few steps back, and he was a bit of a bigger, wider guy too, from what I understood. But he took a few steps back, then lifted up his shirt in the middle of the store to show my manager his chest tattoo. And my manager just said like, oh, okay, yeah, that's nice. That's good. But he told us, he's like, no, I don't even remember what the picture of it was, but there was text involved. And he said the text was just like, it was all squiggly and it just didn't look great. And it looked like he like bent his neck down and was trying to tattoo himself while looking completely down and not mess it up. Like, imagine you doing that on your own chest with like a Sharpie or a pen or something. And yeah, that's probably what happened with the tattoo gun, except even worse because that's permanent there. Needless to say, that man did not get a job. He did not get an interview. He did not get a call back to the game store that I was working at, because there was a lot there. Now, getting close to the end here, usually at the end of these episodes, I talk about or I discuss with a guest what games I'm currently playing or what games we might be currently playing. And I'll be honest, between all the stuff that's been happening here the last month or so, I really haven't had that much time to game. When I did have a game night with some people, we ended up playing Mario Party Superstars, which was really fun. Got to have a whole bunch of laughs there. So, even though it came out a few years ago, we're still having fun with that. And then the other new game I can report on that I've been playing, because I'm still doing my Ring Fit, weekly. So I'm still doing that. I try and do it every day, Monday through Friday. I'll admit today's a Monday. I missed out on it just because of, scheduling conflicts and all that. I'll get back to it tomorrow though. But what ended up happening was, the other game I was looking into was Crow County. I've looked into this game for a while, and I've barely played it, right? But there's just so much good stuff I have to say. It's kind of like that. The very first thing, right at the off the cuff, it's like, hey, what if like Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill kind of like merged together and had some kind of like new type of thing, but like the classic type ones. If there was like a new game that was inspired by that, and that's kind of where Crow County comes from, because it's very much one of those PS1 survival horror type inspired games in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the controls, in terms of how it looks. But I'll say this, I have so many good things to say about it because it's one of those things where I have a big soft spot for the PS1. But the problem with a lot of PS1 games is like people, when they try and capture that PS1 aesthetic, I mean, it's ugly, it's blocky, it's pixelated, because it matches the style of the PS1. Some people love that style, some people hate it. I'm one of those people, I love it, but when you play on it for a while, if I play with that style on a PS1 game, I get it. If it's on another PS1 style type game, I can only handle so much of it. But I'll say this, Crow County is the first modern game that has handled the PS1 aesthetic perfectly. And when it even comes down to thinking like, oh, this will play like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, when I played it, because of the rotatable camera, because of how the controls worked, I was like, it's not that it's inspired by it, I feel like it perfected it. Like, this is how Resident Evil 2 or Silent Hill on PS1 should have played. Like, with this type of control scheme and being able to, move the camera here and such. Wasn't like a freeform thing, but you're just able to kind of turn it around with you a little bit, which makes a huge difference. The shooting mechanics, great on there as well, too. So the gameplay, I've had like no complaints about it. And so far, I mean, it seems to be doing really well with reviews. It seems to be just like, people are enjoying it. People are loving it. The first time I ended up seeing it, I think it was either over Instagram or Twitter, probably Twitter. But mind you, I've seen it getting incredibly high review scores before I bought it, and they're very well deserved. So if you're looking for a type of survival horror PS1 type game without busting out the PS1 or even a PS2, with the PS1 emulator, Crow County is where you want to go. That's what I would recommend. Anyways, that is about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. Again, a little bit of a shorter one. We're coming well under an hour right here, so even below 50 minutes. But I'll give you all some of that time back. But I really appreciate you all spending time hanging out, listening to me. I truly appreciate that. However, if you've made it to the end, first of all, thank you, seriously. Secondly, I like to pick a keyword or a key phrase. And if you use that keyword or key phrase in a comment on the video upload, I'll know that you made it to the end of this episode. Now, typically, I end up picking something that is on my desk. And there's one thing that my partner and I ended up picking up here on one of our last travels. It's a plushie that is like half watermelon, half Shiba Inu, and there's a little squeaker in it as well too. It was originally going to be for the dogs, but then she thought it would be too cute for them to destroy. So it is up on my desk. But either way, let's go with ball. Do you have a exercise ball that you sit on? Would you prefer to sit on a exercise ball when you're working as opposed to an actual chair? Do you like basketball? Do you hate baseball? What do you think of football? Football or football? What are you gonna go with there? If you use the word ball in a comment here on the video upload, I know that you made it to the end of this episode. Anyways, that is about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. If you enjoyed it, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. But as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for listening and watching, everyone. And until next month.